Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Spurred On podcast. It's Thursday afternoon, and I've got a former host of the original Spurred On channel with me, but now he hosts Saturday Social on Sky Sports, as well as many other stuff for Sky, but also he's got a great podcast of his own that I'm sure he'll talk about as well. It is the wonderful Smithy, Mr. Adam Smith. How are you, mate?
Oh, what an intro that was, Barnaby. I love it. Yeah, I'm good, mate. Yeah, honoured to be back in your presence, talking all things Tottenham at a time which is pretty happy, pretty positive at the minute, mate. I'm loving Ange ball. I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, we're loving Big Ange instead, I think it's fair to say.
How are
Let's
you,
go.
mate? And ask how you are. How's things with you? Haven't
Yeah,
seen you in ages.
really fantastic, mate. I think a lot of the kind of audience who watch this channel on YouTube will remember you presenting on the original Spurred On back in the day, where we did such amazing formats as Smithy versus Slats, and you also
Yeah,
presented with Reese, James, and Craig Mitch on other things.
yeah.
Um, what are your memories of that time, mate? It was kind of more of a an early time in your, or more early time in your broadcasting career, and you've gone from strength to strength. What do you remember about it?
Thanks, mate. Yeah, years, but probably decades ago now. It was ages back, wasn't it? But yeah, just really enjoyable time, mate. Just obviously working with yourself and a lot of very exciting content creators and presenters and talking Tottenham. And to be honest, mate, it sounds really cliche, but whenever I get a chance to sit down and talk Tottenham, it doesn't feel like a job because Spurs is such a huge passion of mine, as is football. So very fortunate that I do get to talk about football 24/7 really at Sky on Saturday Social and when I do bits with Tottenham as well. So yeah, I never think of it as a job, mate. Really, very lucky to be talking all things Spurs. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah, and probably worth asking you why you support Spurs in the first place. Is it a family
Oh,
thing?
I would like to say that my family is die-hard Tottenham through and through, but that couldn't be further from the truth. My dad is actually a Wolves fan.
Okay.
The reason being, he's not from that part of the world, but he was in, like Cubs and Scouts and all of that. He was a Wolf Cub when he was a kid, and then found out there was a team called Wolves, so then supported Wolves. At the time we were growing up, Wolves weren't the best team in the league, so he didn't want to impart Wolves onto all his sons. So he let us choose our teams. So I chose Tottenham, sort of Gaza, Lineker, and more recently, from memory, I was very young then, it was more David Ginola era.
Yeah.
David Ginola era was my childhood hero. But before that, it was sort of Gaza and Lineker. But yeah, Ginola was my sort of hero growing up. My younger two brothers then supported Arsenal and Chelsea. And I've got an older half brother who's a Watford fan. So you can imagine in my household. My dad thought he was doing the nice thing by letting us choose, but my mum was like, they're fighting all the time about football. They're arguing all the time. When I say fighting, I mean arguing, not actually fighting. But she didn't think it was the wisest strategy to let us choose complete rival teams. So I've now got a son of my own, and he is from day dot Spurs fan through and through. He's only two. He doesn't know a lot about it, but he's definitely a Tottenham fan. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, good decision. And you must have then suffered quite a lot of difficulty in your I guess teen years probably with your brothers being Chelsea and Arsenal. That must have been difficult with them all winning stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I suffered a lot, but based on how I looked back then as well, because I was quite sure. I thought you were getting into me personally then, but I realised
No?
where you were going with that. Yeah, I was quite sure. I was had an interesting phase at school, but yes, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Obviously, back then, Arsenal particularly and Chelsea were at a higher level than Tottenham, and it's nice that in recent years, Spurs have clawed that back. And I don't want to get too excited, but yeah, it's a lot more of a level playing field in recent years, shall I say, than it was back then. Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, I was on the receiving end of a lot of banter from my brothers, friends, everyone, really, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
And you've alluded to it already. Ange has come in this season. I have to
Yeah.
admit, and I've said it on this channel before, I didn't know a lot about Big Ange before he came in. And I think it was a fair risk from Daniel Levy appointing him. But from everything I've seen, absolutely brilliant and a far cry from what we've had to suffer over the last 5 years. How far do you think we can go? It seems like there's a direction and a belief suddenly. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make about that. It's not just about results, but I think the direction is a really good point you make. I feel like we have a philosophy of how we play football now, and it's exciting, right? And the other thing about Andrew I want to make a point about is that everyone loves him. Like I've got mates who are like, as I said, brothers and friends who are Arsenal, Chelsea, and you can't not like the guy because he's so warming, he's so honest in the way that he talks as well. So I do think he's been a breath of fresh air for the club. I'm very much on the Ange hype train, if that is a thing. But I'm very, I don't want to get too carried away because it is early days. But I just love the way we're playing football. I love what he's brought to the club and how we play and how he conducts himself as well as how we play. In answer to your question about how far we can go, it's really difficult this season. I don't want to be one of those people that get splinters from sitting on the fence. But because we've had so many injuries, it's very difficult to predict how Tottenham are going to get on. Obviously, I thought the start of the season was incredible. The thing that's impressed me most, Barnaby, I will say, is how quickly he's implemented his game plan. Look at someone like Jurgen Klopp, I'm a massive fan of in terms of what he's done for Liverpool, but he took time to build that. You know, a lot of great managers take time. I'm amazed at how quickly he implemented his playing style. So, in answer to your question, I think a good season would be. I think it's very realistic to think we'll get top 4 or top 5, certainly Champions League spots. I think that would be a good season. It is a shame we've drawn Man City in the FA Cup. Obviously, they're probably the best team in the country and the one team you'd want to avoid, although we do have a good record there. But I would definitely think top 4 is a realistic proposition. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Well, I think that potential of the 5th place maybe getting Champions League spot as
exactly.
well. I think one of the things about Spurs is for the first time in a long time, there feels like there's no pressure on us this season at all. Not only because we don't have Europe, but also because just nobody has any expectation, or certainly at the start of the season had any expectation. And when the kind of Chelsea game happened and the injuries and the suspensions, everyone was like, especially non-Spurs fans were like, oh, well, this is what we knew would happen. It's classic Spurs. But now it feels like we've got to that stage towards the end of January where we're getting those players back, and they're going to come back, the players from the AFCON and Sonny from the Asian Cup. And we're still kind of there or thereabouts. I feel like Liverpool, of course, are kind of 7 points ahead. And maybe that the title is a step too far. But definitely in terms of that top 4, top 5, as you said, I just want to put something to you in terms of you mentioning the tough draw at Man City. I was listening to, I think, The View from the Lane, brilliant podcast with Danny Kelly and Jack Pitbrook and Charlie Eccleshare. Yeah, and I think they mentioned, one of them mentioned, might have been James Moore actually, mentioned the average position in the league of teams that we've lost to in the FA Cup in the last 5 seasons has been it's 18th. So we've lost to Palace, Middlesbrough, Norwich as well, etc., etc. So let me put this to you, is it possible that being the underdog in a big cup tie might suit us for the first time in like 5-6 years?
Do you know, it's actually a really good question. It's a positive spin on drawing Man City. Let's be honest about it. It's the one positive we can say.
That's me. A glass half full all the time.
Yeah. It's a good question though, because I do know what you mean. Like, obviously, when we drew Man City, my initial gut reaction was like, "Oh my word, it's Man City. It's one of the worst teams you can draw. They're phenomenal." But the other side of me thought it's very frustrating losing when you're the favourites. And actually, when you go into that game, I think Friday night game, the atmosphere will be electric. You almost think like, well, actually, it's quite nice having that underdog tag. And imagine we were to get through Man City with some of the teams that have already been knocked out. Obviously, Arsenal out already. Imagine Man City going. It only takes another of the big top 6 to potentially get knocked out. I mean, Chelsea have got Aston Villa. That is a very, very tough fixture to call. That's one of those teams out. You then start to look at it and go, oh, actually, it's opening up a little bit. So I do know what you mean by that. And also what I would say is you'd rather get them now than potentially later on, because they do have other games and things like that. So yeah, I know what you're getting at. And the one thing we've got to mention is their record at the stadium. I mean, it's worse than any other team they've played. They've not scored a goal, not got a point, not won a game. I mean, Spurs have got an incredible record, and I do think that does play on players' minds. I mean, I saw an interview with Pep. I know he was half tongue in cheek when he answered it, but he was saying that, you know, winning, his one wish, having done the treble, is just to score a goal at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, I know that was meant as a joke. I'm not deluded to think that he thinks beating Tottenham is harder than winning the Champions League, but there's an element of he must be thinking, what have we got to do to score a goal or win a game here? And I think Spurs have to try and use that in whatever positive way they can. And as I say, you do mention that a lot of these players are coming back, so I think it'll be a very tight game, and I will be watching with biting fingernails and with my hands behind my head behind my hands. Is that the phrase? If it's
hands, not, or behind the sofa, from behind the sofa,
behind
maybe.
The sofa,
how good is it though, Smithy?
I'm a wall behind my sofa, so I can't physically get behind it. It's not important, but yeah, I will be nervous watching it, but I do think we have a shot as well.
Yeah, how good is it though, just knowing that in this game, but also let's say we got through this game in other cup games, and basically every game we play now, we're not going to die wondering. We're not going to sit back and just hope to hit anyone on the break. It's just very, like, it feels to me the correct way for Tottenham to be on the front foot, to be always making chances, potentially always conceding goals. We do concede a lot of goals, but really, like I said, not dying wondering. And that's what I think, you know, and like I said, I'm pretty much always glass half full, but I think if we can get through this, I think the ribbons are on the cup, mate. I really do, because I think we're not, we're going to come up, whoever we come up against, be it, you know, someone from mid to bottom of the Premier League or someone in the Championship or even a Liverpool, we're just going to go for it, and we're going to score goals. I don't know. There's something about it. I think tomorrow night is huge.
Yeah, it is. It is a huge game, and obviously, when you bear in mind it is the only silverware, barring miraculous form in the Premier League. Obviously, it's the only silverware we have realistic chance of winning. I just think a lot of it comes down to who's available, who's not. Obviously, Maddison, we believe, is back but hasn't played a game yet. Kulusevski was ill, so he's likely to start. The back line sorted out, but obviously then you've got players away at AFCON and Asian Cup. So I feel like that starting 11 is going to be so key.
Would you start Maddison? Assuming he's going to make the squad, would you start him?
I would, because it looks like the Celso's not going to play as well. So when you don't have Maddison, I think Gio's been a really solid pair of hands in terms of replacing Maddison. But the fact that Gio's not about as well might sort of turn Ange's hand, knowing that he has to play Maddison. I think Bentancur back is massive. So in theory, you've got Maddison back, Bentancur, Kulusevski, Richarlison will play. The back five is full strength. So you're only missing a few. But obviously, when you're missing Sonny, who is just massive for us.
Especially in those games. He scored 4 in the last 5 against them, yeah.
Against Man City, he always turns it on. So that is a huge blow. And then also, flip side of it, we don't know, will Haaland, a lot of rumours saying he's fit. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne came on and produced an absolute masterclass. But he did say afterwards he's not fully fit. So will they start him, John Stones? So there's question marks about both teams. So I'm intrigued.
And the keeper, Edison, I think, is a big loss. He might not have played anyway because it's the FA Cup, but I believe he's injured anyway.
Yeah, goalkeepers union. I know that you're big on your keepers. I've been taking penalties against you in the past many occasions. But yeah, I'm massively intrigued by what Pep's going to do as well, actually, as to whether he goes full strength or rest. I think we will go full strength, but I'm intrigued to know what he'll do as well.
I think City have got Burnley at home in the week, which, you'd think they won't be as bothered about resting players for that. Although, obviously it's Vincent Kompany bringing his team there. I'm not saying that they would roll over. But yeah, I'm just as intrigued about that as well. I don't know. You mentioned earlier the atmosphere at the stadium. I remember the 2 best atmospheres I can remember at Spurs. One was when you took me to the North London derby in the 15-16 year when we played Arsenal and Harry Kane with the mask scored the goal. And nothing has ever been louder than that moment for me. And then the second best atmosphere actually was the Champions League quarterfinal at the new stadium against City where we won 1-0 and Sonny scored the goal. And Luis saved the penalty. So I think tomorrow night could actually be up there with those atmospheres, and that will count for a lot. I really do. I think we'll absolutely charge at them at the start. I've said this before. I think, but for those of you out there who are gambling people, put it on like plus 4.5, 5.5 goals in tomorrow's game. I think it'll be end to end like a basketball game.
I always do think, actually, it's funny you say that. I'm not a betting man, but I always do think that both teams to score is so nailed on with most Spurs games, aren't they? Just because of the way we play. But we're a very entertaining team to watch. And I think, do you know what, mate? I hadn't, because it's away. I try not to overthink about games the day before, a few days before. But you've really got me nervous about it now, but also excited. I don't think it's going to be. It's nailed on Man City winning. I know a lot of neutrals actually that think Spurs are going to win this, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but I think it's going to be a very tight game.
And do you think do you think there's an element where neither manager will want, certainly Pep won't want a replay? So I could see it in the last 10-15 minutes being like gung ho.
Oh yeah, Pep will not want to replay at all. You're right about that with the fixtures and the amount of competitions they're in. It's a good question. Would we take a replay, knowing that we'd have players coming back, knowing that we'd have players fit, and then possibly resting a few if they've got. When that would be we got the
3-3 there with Royale and Ben Davis at centre half. Don't forget.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
No shade on them, by the way. They played beautifully while they were deputising. I thought they were excellent.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And that's again another great point as to how well some of these players have played, not in their natural position. But I do think we've got a good chance. I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to be 4-0 and be one of these people that will then be seen clipped up if we lose. But I do think there's something about this. I'll tell you what it is. Although I was gutted when we drew Man City, I think I'd rather play Man City than Liverpool, even though I think Man City are more likely to win the Premier League and they're probably a better all-round unit. There is something about when we play Man City that we have to can only use as positivity. Do you know what I mean? Our record against them is pretty good. So I'm cautiously optimistic is how I describe it.
Okay.
2-1 Spurs, come on.
There you go. You accidentally gave your prediction there. I love that. Smithy, mate, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Can you let my audience know where they can see you? Obviously, it's Saturday Social, but tell them a bit about that podcast of yours as well, mate.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And before I go, I just want to say a pleasure being on the podcast with you. Always like doing stuff with you, chatting Spurs. We always have an enjoyable
Top
time. But
man.
yeah, you can see me on Saturday Social on Sky Sports every Saturday morning at 10:30. That is on, and I do various player interviews that we feature on the show that go out on Sky Sports YouTube channel. And yes, I've just launched my own podcast called Inside the Industry Unfiltered, so you can get that on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you listen to your pods. And it's basically me sitting down with YouTubers, influencers, people from the world of TV and entertainment, and chatting about their careers and advice for people. Really, it's a nice, very laid back chat. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to plug both of those.
No problem at all, guys. Make sure
Much
you go.
appreciated.
Make sure you go and find those. Give them a subscribe or a follow wherever you listen to your podcast, or subscribe on YouTube as well. And thank you for your support, of course, everybody. If you're listening to this on the podcast platforms, please do come over to YouTube, youtube.com/@BarnabySlater_. Give us a subscribe, and vice versa. Get over there, subscribe or follow. And most importantly, with a huge game tomorrow night, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.